sightings of ghosts, an abandoned insane asylum, creepy ass dolls, werewolves, and witches, honey. Do not obey. Stay woke. Nobody's gonna stop me. This is real. Do not obey. Stay woke. Scary as hell.
Forests and icy rivers of Alaska, the Tlingit people tell a chilling tale, the legend of the Kushtaka. These mysterious beings, whose name means land otter man, are cunning shapeshifters, blending human and otter features. Kushtaka are said to lurk near water, waiting for lost or wandering children. With haunting cries that mimic loved ones, they lure victims deeper into the wilderness. Once close, the Kushtaka reveal sharp claws and gleaming eyes, spiriting the child away, never to be seen again. Some versions say Kushtaka transform captives into more of their kind, forever separating them from humanity. Others claim the victims vanish, leaving only strange footprints in the snow. The legend likely arose from real dangers faced by Alaskan communities: treacherous waters, wild animals, and children lost in the unforgiving tundra. This haunting tale endures, a warning to beware the eerie call of the Kushtaka and the perilous wilderness they haunt.
Much less heard of, but much more dangerous than the Bermuda Triangle, with more missing persons and murders happening every single year. Alaska has the highest missing persons rate in all of the United States of America. Since the 1970s, an estimated 20,000 people have gone missing within the Alaskan Triangle. This triangle is Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik. Now, this triangle became world famous in 1972 when a plane flew through it containing two politicians that simply vanished off the radar in the blink of an eye. Over 400 aircrafts for 39 days were searching for these politicians to no avail, becoming one of the biggest search and rescue missions in all of U.S. history. Now, this area is famous for magnetic anomalies because of the tectonic plates and the metal-rich soil. Radars can be off by a whole 30 degrees. It's more active than the Bermuda Triangle, and statistically, you are more likely to go missing in this Alaskan Triangle than in the Bermuda Triangle. Some researchers and even former military members have claimed that there's a black pyramid buried under there. It's a theory. It's a theory. Also, one of the reasons why a lot of plane crashes can't be found there is because Alaska is home to so many glaciers that if a plane crashes there, it's kind of just swallowed by cracks of ice. I'm not going to get started on land otter man. I think you should do your own research on that. Notable facts before I end: the remote viewing hotspot. It's the remote viewing hotspot. There's a spirit in the forest. Also, a plane in 1950 with modern technology and 44 people aboard went missing with no trace. It was a military plane, a massive military plane that was never found.
We're the reason no one comes to this part of Alaska.
There's a woman up in I want to say Juneau. Or no. What's the Nome, Alaska? And back in the day, she was she became famous because she claimed aliens were basically like showing up and abducting her and stuff, right? And eventually, her kid got abducted by aliens, or so that's the case, and they accused her of like killing the kid or whatever it may be. Like, obviously, nobody believes that this woman's son was abducted, or daughter was abduced by aliens.
So it's not currently available in our country?
Yeah, it's like in Canada.
They're day off from the cannery, went out to go hunting. Many of them did not come back, and a few of their bodies, though, washed up from the hills down in runoff into the lagoon in the port to get to Portlock, and they had been savaged and not eaten. They knew what it looked like if somebody had been eaten by a bear, and it was not a bear. And so virtually the late 50s, virtually overnight, there had been rocks rolling down the ravine onto buildings and cries in the night. And so virtually overnight, the entire village was abandoned. They also had the ability to make sounds like birds, other things in people's voices, and hypnotize people. In particular, children would wake up in the middle of the night hearing bird song, and then they would hear voices telling them to come outside and play. And most of the time that was blamed on these smaller big feet. And other things that people have talked about is what some people call eye flash, where if you're out and going backward in time, if you got a torch or a lantern and you hold it up and shine it, and then you see the light reflecting off the eyes, and it's not the same as the color of, say, a rabbit. Usually you get a red light flashing back. It's very different nature and character. People talk about that. Again, up and down the Northwest, the smell.
Alaska is haunted as a motherfucker. It seems the people and the spirits that inhabit Alaska are pretty hardcore. In Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, when an infant patient is close to death, spirits will appear in the nursery wing. The nurses believe that these are good spirits or angels there to take the little one to the other side. There are also many reports of plunging temperatures and the sound of babies crying coming from empty rooms. Nightmute High School seems to have its own version of Moaning Myrtle from Harry Potter. A little girl is said to haunt the bathroom here, making the toilets flush and the lights flicker, but she is not bound only to the bathroom. She is said to wander the halls, and people can hear a little girl humming when no one else is around. She also likes to dribble the basketballs when they're left unattended in the gym. Sadly, nobody is sure who this little girl is, but there might be a connection to a grave found under room 106. The story of Badarka Road is one of Alaska's most famous ghost stories. A 5-year-old little girl and her father were chopping wood to bring back to the cabin where her mother and her sister were waiting. The father allegedly buried the axe into the wood so his daughter wouldn't fall on it, but unfortunately when his back was turned, she tried to pull it out to chop wood herself to impress her dad. Instead, she tragically ended up pulling the axe down on her own head, killing herself immediately. Her father was understandably distraught, cradling her lifeless body, and refused to leave her in the woods alone. He stayed there through the winter and eventually died of hypothermia. Now, it is said if you drive down that road at 3:30 a.m., you might just see a man cradling his lifeless daughter on the side of the road. Finally, we have the Eldred Rock Lighthouse in the Lynn Canal. Just off Alaska's coast, this is the oldest lighthouse in the state. It came to be due to a number of tragic shipwrecks that occurred on this island. The most notorious shipwreck to occur here was the Clara Nevada in 1898. It ran aground on the island, bursting into flames, and then sank into the icy depths below. There were 75 casualties. These poor souls, as well as the many other victims of shipwrecks, are said to haunt the island and the surrounding waters to this day.
A warning for anyone living or visiting Fairbanks, Alaska. Avoid the eastern side of Farmers Loop and steer clear of Sheep Creek Road at night. You might encounter the eyeless monster. I was in the passenger seat, and on that dark night, my mom had the car's brights on. As we were about to pass the clearing and drive past the forest, we spotted it. Initially, we mistook it for a dog, but when it emerged from the ditch into the light, it was quite clear that it wasn't. It crawled on all fours, resembling a naked person on the ground, but its skin was unnaturally pale. My mom started screaming and drove faster. As a child, I was terrified. As we drove by, it lifted its head, revealing its face, either eyeless or with black eyes. There was no mouth, but it seemed to attempt a smile. We only discussed it in the car that night, and never again. Despite my attempts, my mom claims not to remember, but there's a knowing look in her eyes whenever I bring it up.
Photo seems like a lovely photo of a grandmother and her granddaughter while in Alaska until you zoom in and you see something peculiar. This photo was taken in 1982 and was sent in by Lori of her mother-in-law and her niece, and what appears to be another little tiny person in between them. Right here. It even looks like the tiny person is holding on to her leg. Now, yes, this is a grainy photo. This photo was taken in 1982. It wasn't taken by a fancy cell phone or anything like that, so this is what we have. Supposedly, the niece had been talking about her little friend the whole time. She could see him. No one else could. She knew that he was in the photo. So when they got the photo back, she was excited to show them that her little friend that she was talking about was there the whole time. So I was curious if there were any kind of little people stories from Alaska or anything like that. So I did some research and I found out about this. I'm not even going to try to say it. I couldn't find anywhere online how to properly pronounce it, so I don't want to mess it up, but this is what they are referred to as. The story goes that they hide underground and they're mischievous. They like to get into things and cause trouble, but they will make friends with little kids. But they also like to take little kids. There is one story that I found of a little boy that was taken. They just kind of like messed with him and just did a bunch of mischievous, kind of mean things to him, but then brought him back. There's also a story of two hunters that were out hunting for caribou, and they saw across the way on a ridge the caribou get taken down by these four little people. They said that they were about knee high, which is about how tall this is. They saw them pick up the caribou and move it, which they said would be impossible, so they waited until they were finished doing what they were doing, and they went over there, and they couldn't even find like a drop of any kind of remains to prove that the caribou was there, even though both of them had seen it.
Did a cryptid force an entire Alaskan town to abandon their homes and businesses? Pull up a chair and let's talk about Portlock, Alaska, one of Alaska's most famous ghost towns. The town of Portlock, Alaska was founded in 1915 along the Kenai Peninsula. Portlock was built along a sheltered bay on the Gulf of Alaska side about 16 miles south of Seldovia. The town ran along the shore, docks, buildings, beach, and the land behind it jutted into thick timber and steep slopes. No roads reached the bay, and everything arrived by boat, people, mail, fuel, food, and parts. Many supply boats couldn't even make it to shore because the bay was too shallow. But despite all this, Portlock was actually doing okay. Most work centered on salmon and seasonal labor, with crews of small boats working long days timed to tides and weather. Various shops, a saloon, and even family homes soon followed. But around the 1930s, the stories coming out of Portlock began to change. People started to go missing, with one man being dragged into the woods within earshot of his fellows. Searchers pushed up the escarpments and high cliffs behind the town in hopes of finding any hint or trace of this missing man. Instead, they found oversized human-like tracks where no one expected them, and supposedly clear signs that a man had been dragged into the forest. But a combination of treacherous terrain and bad weather forced the men to return and backtrack back to town. A short time later, another man goes missing, this time working on a logging crew, and supposedly he was found later on half consumed. Tracks that they found near the body did not match any known predator like a bear or a mountain lion. By the 1940s, many more of these stories would crop up, to the point that the people of Portlock would tell visitors that they were planning to leave. They would say something in the woods didn't want them there. Indigenous Alaskans have a name for this something: Nantinuk, or something very similar to the Sasquatch of popular fiction. Often described as a large, hairy, man-like creature who is also strong enough to take a person off of their feet, and very, very territorial. Whether you believe in cryptids or no, the people of Portlock did in fact abandon the town. While it would be kind of silly to deny that they faced the problems that any isolated town might face, such as expensive supplies, limited service, and increased isolation. The town started to thin out in the mid-1940s, with the last resident leaving about 1950, and many of the people who left did acknowledge that they struggled to live in such an isolated, remote, and difficult place to live, but that these details were not what ultimately forced them to leave. Apparently, there were too many mishaps, too many missing men, too many unexplained circumstances that made life there very uncomfortable.
Shalom. If you don't know me, my name is Riley, and I read spooky, scary ghost stories every day for your entertainment. Currently, we're reading ghost stories about Alaska because we had a commenter recommend the state of Alaska. So this story was posted in the subreddit Paranormal. The title is Freezing Cold Room in Alaska During the Summer. Fairbanks, Alaska, summer of 2008. I was 16 years old at the time. I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, but grew up in Seattle, Washington, frequently visiting my grandparents in Fairbanks ever since I was a child. Very nice memories there. So it's 2008, my grandpa had passed away a few years prior. My uncle had reached out to my mom saying, one of your kids needs to come out here to help with grandma's garden. She has been depressed and cannot keep up with it. 16-year-old me said, cool, I'd love to. So I went to Fairbanks to visit my grandma for 3 weeks, working on the garden each day with my younger cousin. My grandma's house was extremely creepy, and it has always been since I was a young kid. I can't tell you when it was built exactly, but it's old, maybe 50s or 60s. It has been in a couple of tundra floods, so every single floorboard in the house has a nice creak to it. The front yard is huge, with a 100-yard driveway. People used to be confused and think her front yard was a public park. The basement is deep underground, about 30 steps to get down there. Very steep steps. Once down there, it is full of vintage dolls, toys, mannequins, etc., and all around creepy stuff from back in the day. I really believe that the basement is bigger than the main house altogether. My grandmother made the basement an apartment cozy for me to stay with my own space and all, with me being 16. The haunting. So, first day of me arriving to Fairbanks, my grandma prepared the basement apartment for me to sleep in for the next couple of weeks. The apartment room had 70s style wallpaper, an old lamp, a bed, and probably the first digital radio clock ever created. I go to sleep that night, wake up, and the first thing I notice is that it's 3 a.m. on the dot. The bed I'm lying in is perfectly made, almost like it was ironed with no creases or anything in the blanket. It was weird. I didn't think anything about it at the time, just sucked that I woke up in the middle of the night. Then I realized I'm cold as hell. The Antarctica cold, like below 50 cold. I have been in blizzards before, and this was the coldest I have ever been in my life, still to this day. My teeth were chattering violently and was breathing out huge clouds of air inside of my bedroom. In summer. I've heard friends say it was just air conditioning, but the house for sure doesn't have AC. Also, I know it's Alaska, but summer is pretty normal as far as temperature goes, 80s to 90s. After that, things got quiet, like pin drop quiet, and it felt as though the darkness in the corner of the room was closing in. I snatched up all blankets and pillows in one swoop and bolted out of the door. Soon as I'm out the door, temperature's back to normal. I ran for my life, falling hard multiple times, slipped, busted my hip twice. Once I got to the stairs, I literally tried to jump up 10 steps and broke 2 of my toes, almost lost fingernails as well, trying to claw my way up the stairs. Once I was upstairs, I went to sleep on the couch in the living room. My grandma woke me up laughing, like, "Oh, you didn't like it down there." I replied, like, "I did, just like it better up here." Didn't think anything of it for years until I watched the Conjuring movie with a friend. The scenes where all the clocks go to 3 and the rooms turn cold made me realize what had happened wasn't normal. I actually freaked out the first time I watched that movie. I did not see anything that night, but something weird definitely happened.
I really believe Portlock is evil.
There's a lot of strange stuff happening down there.
It was a pretty large community.
It was a booming town.
It had a school and a post office.
It probably would have been a city, you know, if it would have kept thriving.
But then people started to disappear. Over a span of 2 years, over 30 people were found dead or missing. The elders evacuated the town.
Went from 100 to 0 overnight.
Everybody left.
My mom, and she lived there as a child, said the last person out of there. He took a glass of his holy water, he drank it, got on a boat, said that's enough, we're going.
In this video, I'm going to show you the haunted bathroom in the Hotel Captain Cook in downtown Anchorage, Alaska. Legend has it that a young woman committed suicide in one of these bathrooms in 1972, and that her spirit never left, and she still haunts the bathroom. A lot of the paranormal activity that people have reported has to do with the last stall on the left, but women were reporting feeling very faint, the lights flickering, or the faucets turning on and off by themselves. There wasn't anyone else in the bathroom today, so I thought it was a good day to take a look around. This is the last stall on the left, the one that allegedly has the most paranormal activity. You can't see my hand here, but I'm pushing on it and it is shut and locked. I was too short to look up and over the stall, so I just had to put my camera over and just hope that I was able to capture something. I was really scared that somebody was going to walk in while I was recording, so I just did it really fast, but you can see that it's screwed shut from the inside. At this point, I wasn't really convinced that there was any paranormal activity, but then I did hear some commotion. If you listen very carefully, you can hear some tapping. The noises sounded a lot closer to me in person, but I am on the bottom floor, so that might explain some of the noises that I heard. It was just a pretty big coincidence that it was happening while I was standing in there recording about ghosts.
A jinxiahuk, or a little person. This is my how many time trying to make it. I struggle telling this story because It's scary. When I was a kid, me and my cousin used to go to the park almost every single day. This day was no different. We were walking past the high school when I noticed something moving with the corner of my eye, so I looked over and I froze. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing because I heard stories about Jinxiarux growing up, but I wasn't sure if they were real or not, but I was seeing a little person with my own eyes. And it wasn't wearing the native clothing in the photos that I shared in the last video, but it was instead wearing this like elf outfit, like from head to toe, the hat, the outfit, the buckle, the pointy shoes, everything, but it was all yellow. As it was running, it had jumped and it's like everything went in slow motion for a second. So it's running and then it just looks over at me. I cannot. So it looked over at me with this creepy smile and its skin, I'll go ahead and insert the photo that I asked AI to make. Its skin was like this bluish gray color. It had scars all over its face. It had this big creepy grin and its eyes were yellow. As it was frozen in midair and smiling its creepy smile, it turned back and then it's like everything went in fast motion again. It ran off and I was in shock and I was thinking, like, surely this is my imagination. Like, there's no way I just saw what I just saw. And so I looked over at my cousin and realized that she also was frozen in place, staring in that direction. And I was like, did you see what I just saw? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, there's no way we saw the same thing. So I'm like asking her, like, what did you see? And she said, I saw a little person. And I'm like, oh, what outfit was it wearing? What color? I was asking her all these descriptive things and she was telling me exactly what I saw. At that point, I realized I was not imagining things. I was not seeing things. So we turn around, we bolted out of there. We're terrified and like screaming at this point, running. And we went home and we did not go out for the rest of the day. So
as they had pulled him onto solid ground, they grabbed his arms, wrenched them behind his back, and the next thing he felt was cold metal clicking around his wrists. Ted had no idea what was going on. He didn't understand it, but he kept trying to explain himself. Unfortunately, nobody was listening. Ted was led to a patrol car and put inside, and as the door slammed shut, he just sat in the back, still shaking, trying to come to terms with what was really happening. He kept repeating the same thing out loud over and over again. They're real. They're real. They're real. Ted had just been arrested. Now, we're going to go back in time just a little bit. On September 15th, 2012, two brothers, Paul and Chuck Buckle, set off together down the northwestern Alaska's Squirrel River. Chuck had actually flown all the way from Michigan to hunt grizzly bear in the Kobuk Valley. Because his brother Paul had lived in the nearby town of Kotzebue, he offered to be his brother's guide. However, their trek wasn't as glamorous as they would have hoped. 3 days after they departed, morale was low. It had been pouring down rain nonstop. They were soaked, they were cold, they were tired. As you can imagine, they had not seen a single bear. They weren't really sure what they were going to do. Several times they'd even debated about just turning back and trying this again next fall, but there was just something in Chuck that made him want to push on. But they're both starting to become desperate. And now at some point during this track, Paul spotted his small cabin through the trees sitting on the riverbank. He even called out to his brother. He's like, look, I think we should go and check this cabin out. We need to find shelter. The weather is worse than we thought. I think it's our best chance. Now, Paul wasn't just telling his brother to go and investigate some abandoned cabin because he actually knew who owned it. In fact, it had belonged to a friend of his, another hunter who would use this on and off. I mean, this was their perfect opportunity. So, acting quickly, both brothers paddle to shore. They get out, they tie up the raft, they grab their supplies, and they head towards the cabin. Completely out of the blue, I see this large shape or mass break through the clearing and jump on top of this doe. And the closer I looked at it, and I could see it turn and writhe and twist as it's tearing apart the meat of this doe, which it killed probably almost instantaneously, I noticed that it looks distinctly canine. It was pure black and had a very elongated face, almost exaggerated, had a very set-in head, and looked very evil looking. Another thing that I thought was strange was I noticed these quill-like spines protruding out the back of its head, the backs of its arms, and its back. Young me interrupted this thing's hunt or disturbed its food supply, and that could have cost me my life. That's the only time I've ever experienced, out in the wilderness, the Alaskan devil.
An experience. Hi Riley, I'm an Alaskan native, grew up in rural Alaska. My great-grandma was a shaman and my great-grandfather was a medicine man. I had experience since I was a kid, but this experience I never heard any stories about or saw anywhere in Alaska. I had a similar experience in Texas, but I would never thought I would experience this in Alaska. Night of August 13th, 2025, myself, my honey, and my cousin took a late-night drive to Valdez. Left Anchorage after 6-7 p.m., got into Glen Allen around midnight. Stopped, gassed up, got snacks and drinks, left to go to Valdez about 30 to 45 minutes into the drive around Willow Lake area. We were in an area just wooded, no houses, driveways, or anything like that. No signs of pedestrians being around. Out of nowhere is what I still have chills and creeped out on what it was. It was sitting half on the gravel and resting in the grass, sitting with its arms crossed its legs, pure pale white skin with short gray hair, humanoid with a disfigured and not normal face. Crew neck purple sweater with light blue bell-bottom jeans with white shoes. Babe, have you ever given a criminal investigator a description? Because you're doing real well right now, okay? The only way to describe it is a late 90s outfit. Sounds like my type of demon. Wasn't fazed by the car or my high beams. First thought, I wonder if they needed help until I passed it. It went quiet and then the energy shifted and I had the chills to the core of my bones from head to toe, shaking really bad as I drove past it. I decided to continue and asked if anyone else saw that. My honey said he saw only it in the corner of his eye, but not as clearly as I saw this thing. I sometimes still see this when I'm dreaming and it just creeps me out. If I knew how to draw and sketch, I can put every detail on paper.
Reading spooky stories from all 50 states. Today we're talking about Alaska. There's an old building down in Seward called the Jesse Lee Home for Children. It was an orphanage built back in the 1920s after a massive flu epidemic left hundreds of kids without families. They say it was a good place once. Kids went to school, learned trades, tried to rebuild some kind of life. But over the years, that place picked up a darkness that never really went away. In 1964, the Good Friday earthquake, the biggest one Alaska ever had, hit. Parts of the orphanage collapsed and some children didn't make it out. The place was never the same after that. It shut down a few years later and the building's just been sitting there ever since. Huge, gray, and half collapsed, covered in moss and graffiti. But a local woman who grew up in Seward told this story. Her brother and his friends broke in one night in the late 90s, just to mess around. They had flashlights, took pictures, that kind of thing. She said everything was fine at first, just creaky floors, broken furniture, the usual. Then they started hearing this weird tapping sound upstairs. Not random, rhythmic, like knuckles on a desk. They followed it to what used to be a dormitory. On the wall there were faint chalk marks, like a kid had been doing math problems. The tapping stopped the second they stepped inside. And one of the guys swore he heard a kid whisper right behind him. He said, "Miss Carla?" That was the name of one of the caretakers who died during the quake. They bolted. When they got outside, they realized every single flashlight had gone out at the same time. And when they looked back at the building from the street, there was a light flickering on one of the second-story windows, like an old lantern swinging back and forth. The power's been cut for decades.
All the way down there, on the mountaintop, they went all the way up to the front. Way up there. I don't know if see the orange light on the back? That's them. Oh God, I got scared. I'm literally standing in front of this window again, trying to get in different positions to see if I can see what I seen again. I'm not getting it. I just want to rule out that it's not some sort of reflection glitch or something. And this is with the IR off, and I'm not getting anything. It's as dry as a whistle. I don't know what the hell I saw earlier. Well, that was creepy. IR on, just for good measure. Nope. Nothing. Alright. I knew I saw a fucking shadow. I saw the same thing earlier with the GoPro.
I used to work on the north slope of Alaska. This experience is why I'll never go back. I used to work on the north slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work we were doing required us to travel far out into the Alaska Petroleum Reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would lead to exploration drilling pads. Our job was to go out after they finished the initial drilling and test rock formations for their oil-producing qualities. It was mid-January. The sun hadn't quite come up yet. And when I say the sun hadn't come up, I mean in almost a month and a half. Polar nights are intense. The particular well site we were traveling to was about 60 miles west of Alpine, Alaska, deep in the wilderness. Our job took a week, but we finished and were headed back to camp to finish our hitch and go home. At the beginning and end of the ice roads are guard shacks that you have to check in and out of for safety, no cell reception, and radios work only up to a distance. If you don't check in or out in a set time, they come looking for you to ensure you're not a popsicle. It was about 4 in the morning, not that it mattered in the land of endless night, and we were halfway across the ice road. Travel was slow as the speed limit on the roads is only 25 miles per hour. When something appeared on the road in our headlights, it was a man in jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie jacket, walking down an ice road in wilderness tundra at 4 a.m. and it was minus 20 degrees outside. It's not unusual for the local Inuit people to be out this far hunting. Maybe his snowmobile broke down and he's trying to get back to the guard shack. Seemed plausible. He didn't acknowledge us as our trucks rolled up next to him. He just kept shuffling forward. He didn't seem cold. His clothing, while totally not appropriate for this extreme weather, appeared warm and dry. We also noticed he wasn't Inuit, but Caucasian. I rolled down my window and asked if he needed any help and if he was okay. He still didn't acknowledge us, just kept shuffling forward. His face was completely blank, devoid of any thought or emotions. The other guys in my truck suggested that maybe he was in an accident and in shock. I continued rolling my truck alongside him as he trudged down the road, still trying to get his attention. Even in this extreme cold, I could occasionally get whiffs of a peculiar smell coming off him. He smelled acidic, if that makes sense. There was just a lot about this guy that made the hair on my neck stand up. The guy behind me in the truck's crew cab had had enough of all this. He rolled down his window and reached out to grab the guy. He later said he was just going to try and shake him out of his stupor. Before my buddy's hand could reach him, though, this walking popsicle spun around and latched onto my buddy's outstretched arm. He glared at my buddy and then at me with this look of pure rage, not removing his hand from his arm. If emotions had a physical temperature, this guy could have melted the entire tundra that night. My buddy groaned in pain as he tried to get his arm free from Mr. Popsicle. At that moment, this guy starts screaming in our faces. There was so much hate and rage and anger in that scream. It was absolutely terrifying. I slammed on the gas and spun out on the ice for a second before the wheels caught and launched us forward. Popsicle Dude still had a hold of my buddy's arm and was trying to pull him out of the truck. He was running alongside the truck while the other guys in the cab held onto my buddy to keep him inside. After several moments, it could only have been a few seconds at most, my buddy tore free from this guy and we hauled ass to the guard shack another 30 miles down the road. We checked in with the guards and reported what we had just seen. The guard was looking at us like we were pulling a prank, but policy said they had to check it out regardless. My buddy's arm was sore, and when he pulled back his sleeve, there were noticeable bruises in the shape of a hand around his arm. We filed a report with the guard and we're told to head back to our camp. None of us really wanted to talk about what happened, and it was a quiet drive the rest of the way.
Oh my god, it just came. You guys, I am actually getting kind of scared. I don't ever get scared of stuff like this, but what the heck? You guys. Right as I started talking about spirits, the light turned on houses. How cool is that? But how not cool is it that right when I was Googling about the spirit houses, the light in front of the church turned on again. Are the spirits trying to started soul in the afterlife? Right as I read that sentence, of course, that light turned on again. Of course, it could mean nothing, but it could mean something.
Alaska is a port city that's about 60 miles south of Anchorage, and it's home to one of the oldest foot races in America called the Mount Marathon Race. Now, this race is not actually a marathon because a marathon by definition is 26.2 miles long. The Mount Marathon Race is actually only 3 miles long, but it's considered one of the most challenging short races in the world because it's basically 1.5 miles straight up a mountain and then 1.5 miles straight back down again. Despite its grueling nature, there had never been a fatality or a disappearance during the running of this race, but that changed in 2012. 66-year-old Alaskan resident Paul LeMaitre was a career counselor on a military base in Anchorage. His job was to help outgoing military members adjust to civilian life, and his primary responsibility was helping them with their resume. Outside of work, Paul liked to keep himself in top physical shape, and one of his favorite activities was going for runs. And so in 2012, he finally committed to running the Mount Marathon Race, something he had wanted to do for some time, but he kept putting it off. In the months leading up to the race, Paul trained hard to make sure he was ready. He wasn't trying to win the race or really even be competitive. He just wanted to finish the race in a respectable time. So at 3 p.m. on July 4th, 2012, Paul found himself at the start of the Mount Marathon Race, and his family was on the sidewalk cheering him on. The race director fired the starting gun, and Paul, along with 500 other racers, took off. For reference, a man of Paul's age and physical fitness level should be able to complete this race in about 2 hours or less. But at 5 p.m., when virtually all the other runners had finished the race and Paul was nowhere to be found, his family members were concerned, but they knew he wasn't trying to win the race. They knew he was probably going to be on the slower end, but they were now starting to pay attention and were anxious for him to show up. 45 minutes later, a race timing crew up at the top of the mountain at the turnaround point began breaking down their setup. About 15 minutes later, when they were done, they started walking down the mountain right as Paul showed up at the top. And they said to him, "You are the last racer on this course. Do you still want to continue?" And he said, "Yes, I definitely still want to continue." And so the timing crew said, "That's fine. Just take your time, be careful, and we'll see you at the bottom." And so the timing crew, they take off right in front of Paul, going straight down this well-marked course, and they would turn around and see Paul standing there, catching his breath, getting ready to make his own descent. And so the timing crew, who was moving much faster than Paul, very quickly got out of sight of him. And so before long, they were at the bottom, they turned around, and there's no sign of Paul. So they went and found Paul's family and said, "Hey, we just spoke to him. He seems totally fine, but just so you know, if you don't see him in 90 minutes, I would contact the race officials and let them know, because he should be down by then." And so Paul's family sat at the bottom of this race, looking up, expecting to see him any moment, but 90 minutes came and went, and he never showed up. They wound up waiting another 30 minutes just in case, but again, he didn't show up.
Takes place in Nenana Ridge, which is 70 miles out of Fairbanks, Alaska. I worked for an old logger named Jack Howard. He was Jippo, and I'm telling you, this guy was so tight with his money that he would squeak when he walked. Now, Jack had this timber sale up on Nenana Ridge, and we were up there logging it and decking logs and bucketing and getting them hauled away. And later on, Jack Howard decided to bring his trailer up to where we're logging at. To give you a visual of what this trailer was, it was a travel trailer. I couldn't tell you how old this thing was, but it was ancient. And what he did is, years ago, he sprayed the outside of the trailer with that spray foam insulation stuff, because when it's 30 below zero or 70 below zero, it can get pretty chilly. And then in a stroke of genius, Jack could not, he was horrible at colors. That trailer was the color of this shirt. It was hideous. Everyone called it the turtle. So one day, the crew, we're all sitting inside this trailer, and we're all having lunch because it's 24-hour daylight, so the logging hours are very long. And Jack tells us this story. So at the time, there's four of us. You got me, a guy named Tom, and Jack, and another guy named Steve. And anyways, the point being, Jack tells this story of an old timber faller that used to work for him, and Jack would hire this guy to go out there and cut, and against all law regulations when it comes to logging, he hired this guy to go out there by himself and fall timber. Now, there's no real cell phone reception out there, so we call it the telephone. Is if you got up on a small little ridge a couple miles away and there's enough reception out there, you make a phone call, and this guy would check on Jack every day to let him know he's okay. Well, 3 or 4 days go by, and it's like 20 below zero, and Jack's like, I haven't heard from this guy, so I'm going to run out there. And so Jack drives out to Nenana Ridge. He walks inside the trailer, and there is the old timber faller with a blue Pabst beer, dead on a doornail, and frozen. Now, the funny part of this story is that Tom was sitting in an exact spot where Jack said that's where this old man was sitting, and Tom just freaks out. Oh my God, I never want to sit where a dead person sat at, blah, 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 and he starts having a fit, and we're all laughing at him. So he tells us the story, and then there's another unit that's butt up against that one where Jack's like, Preston, you're a timber faller, I'll pay you X amount of dollars per day to go out there and fall timber. And I said, no problem. Now again, I'm by myself, which is totally against the law, but you know, I need money. Now, just so you understand, this travel trailer is so light, we pulled it with an F-150, you couldn't even feel that you're pulling anything. It was extremely light. So once I start cutting, I'm completely by myself, and I go to bed one night. Now, I wasn't out there very long. I'm talking like a couple of days. And one night, after I get done washing myself the whole 9 yards and eat dinner, I'm in bed, I'm exhausted, and as I'm laying there asleep, all of a sudden, I could feel and I could hear footsteps walking down the trailer coming my way. As I'm laying there in this bunk, the footsteps walked by me, and I'm telling you, you could clearly hear it. And the trailer was actually doing this as they're walking by.